Welcome, everyone. We're so glad all of you have joined us for this important milestone in the life of our great university, and to mark the culmination of the tremendous work of the Chancellor's Advisory Committee on History and Context. It's especially rewarding to be here to witness the tangible results of this deliberate, thoughtful, and academically focused endeavor. So first, I'd like to convey my profound thanks to the members of the committee for their exceptional work on this challenging but very important task for the university. And I'd also like to recognize the members of the planning committee for our event today. You all have done an extraordinary job of coordinating and implementing today's event, and we truly appreciate all the energy, effort, and thoughtfulness you poured into making this ceremony a wonderful celebration for our campus community. If you recall, I established the CACHC, as we say, it kind of rolls off your tongue, to address Recommendation 5 from the 2014 Action Plan, which urged the university to, and I quote, offer more history, putting the past into context, and to do so, quote, without attempts to erase history, even some difficult history. As Mississippi's flagship university, we have long been committed to honest and open dialogue about our history, and the work of the CACHC represents that commitment in action, informed by expertise and conducted with respectful candor. It's not always easy to recognize significant moments when we're in the midst of them. It can be challenging to tell the story of change and transformation while we are going through it. But we are here today to recognize that this work indeed is a significant moment of change and transformation in the life of our university. And we're here to honor this moment by sharing our story broadly and in a forthright manner through the 6 contextualization plaques we're unveiling today. In my letter from July 6 last summer to our university community, I shared the CACHC's final report and the recommendations we would implement, including plaques to contextualize Longstreet Hall, George Hall, Lamar Hall, Barnard Observatory, and the Tiffany Stained Glass Window in Ventris Hall, as well as a plaque noting the contributions of enslaved laborers. These plaques are daily reminders of our obligation to learn from the past and commit to an inclusive future. We're especially honored to have student ambassadors here with us today who will share the powerful words from these plaques a little later in today's ceremony. In addition to the 6 contextualization plaques, we have the remaining tasks to finalize. First, we will seek to rename Vardaman Hall once we have the renovation completed in a few years. Secondly, we will clarify that Johnson Commons is named after Paul B. Johnson Sr. by adding the designation senior to the building name. And we have the university cemetery and a related memorial for which we will be adding individual gravestones to recognize the sacrifice of each person known to be buried there, as well as a marker in an appropriate location to recognize the African American men from Lafayette County who served in the Civil War in the, at the time, called U.S. Colored Troops. As an educational institution, we have a responsibility to teach and foster learning, especially from parts of our history that are painful. All these outcomes emanating from the CACHC process remind us that to move forward as a community, we must neither hide from nor hide the problems of our past. It's now my honor to introduce our keynote speaker today, Dr. John Neff, Associate Professor of History and Director of the Center for Civil War Research. Upon completion of his PhD from the University of California, Riverside, Dr. Neff joined the UM faculty in 1999 with a research and teaching focus in Civil War memory. In 2005, he published his first book entitled Honoring the Civil War Dead, commemoration, and the problem of reconciliation. Dr. Neff has been widely recognized for his teaching excellence. In 2005, he was named the College of Liberal Arts Teacher of the Year. And 4 years later, he received the L.C.B. Hood Outstanding Teacher Award. Along with Associate Director Dr. April Holm, as Director of the Center for Civil War Research, Dr. Neff is responsible for hosting the annual conference on the Civil War, awarding the Wiley Silver Prize for the best book published on the Civil War era, and organizing the Burnham Lecture, which brings distinguished scholars of the Civil War era to campus to share their work. Especially notable for today's ceremony, Dr. Neff served as a member of the Chancellor's Advisory Committee on History and Context, as well as the planning committee responsible for our event today. Dr. Neff, we truly appreciate your service on both these committees, and we're so pleased to have you here as our keynote speaker. Please let's welcome Dr. John Neff.
Thank you all. Thank you, Chancellor, for your leadership, which brings us to this auspicious occasion today. Thank you, Dr. Caldwell, Dr. Clark, for making this event possible as well. Thank you to all of my colleagues, brothers and sisters in arms on the CACHC, whose work we celebrate today. And it's worth celebrating. And thank you to all of you who have also joined us in this endeavor. It is a pleasure to be with you today on this very important day in the life of the university. Today we take a step in our long journey, passing through yet another crossroads together. We take a bold step today in the right direction, a step taken not for ourselves alone, but also for all who come after us. I speak of our actions today as a crossroads. When thinking about the work we have done, are still doing, it seems an apt metaphor. Cultures around the world have set great significance in crossroads, the simple intersection of paths. Crossroads can be difficult, mysterious, sometimes possibly dangerous. In Mississippi, Robert Johnson met the devil at a crossroads and made a bargain that obtained for him his infernal but somehow divine talent. Crossroads have come to represent many things to many people. But for today, simply think of crossroads as points of decision. At a crossroads, do you forge ahead? Do you turn to one side or the other? Do you hesitate to decide, remaining at the crossroads? Do you choose not to decide, but instead reverse course and retreat from your path, from your future? Many years ago, Robert Frost wrote of meeting such a point of decision. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had worn them really much the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Having made his decision, however, it is unclear from his poem whether Frost felt he had made the right decision. His first impulse, in fact, is to return at some future time to see where the other path led. A feeling he expressed even as he knew he would not return, would not take that other path, knew he could not make that decision twice. He wrote, "Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere, ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference." But what sort of difference? A positive one? One he came to regret? Or does the regret reside in the inability to make a different second choice? Do you realize, as Frost did, that you are the sum of all the crossroads in your life? Each one of us is the consequence of choices made and left unmade, turns to this side, turns to that, correct turns, turns leading to dead ends, steps that left us wandering, steps that moved us forward. As this is true for us, so too is it true for the university. This grand institution is also the sum of its decisions. To accept the gift of two white men holding title to lands once occupied by Choctaws and Chickasaws, who by then had been removed to places far away. To build the Lyceum and classrooms and dormitories and an observatory with enslaved labor hired from nearby farms and plantations. To invite students, many of them scions of slave-produced wealth, to study here, improve themselves here, become state and even national leaders at this place. To close the doors of the university in time of war, when young men left to faraway battlefields and far too few came home. To reopen the university, still maintained by the labor of African American men and women, no longer slaves, but also not completely free. To open enrollment to white women, and later to reduce the power of fraternities, creating a more egalitarian institution for white Mississippians. To reject the applications of African American men and women, Charles H. Gray, Pauline Y. Weathersby, Robert C. Leathers, Charles H.T. Deborah, Medgar Evers, and Clennon King, among others, before that decision was taken out of the university's hands by federal enforcement of the admission of James Meredith in 1962. To expand the extent and quality of instruction on the campus, build a research library, broaden the curriculum, and take the measures necessary to aim at and finally achieve Phi Beta Kappa and Carnegie R1 status. To take the long view on flags, never having displayed a state flag much but until 1890, and deciding after student activism and faculty agreement and administrative acceptance that the 1890 flag and all it represents should not fly on our campus. We, as a community, are the sum of these decisions and thousands more. The making of decisions, the choice of which path to travel, is not always easy. Fortunately, as we make our decisions at each crossroad, we have with us old and familiar company. At our side and at our beckoning stand history and memory, both useful, quite different, at once comforting and troubling. History is what we know. Memory is what we feel. Neither is certain. History is fragmentary, incomplete, filled with contending views drawn from contradictory evidence. History is fraught with silences. Some are accidental, some imposed by the strong upon the weak, some intentional, hiding the past in shame. We cannot avoid the silences, the gaps in evidence, which we are unable and would be unwise to fill. Memory is likewise fragmentary, similarly incomplete, but as it makes no claim to truth except on a very personal level, its inconsistencies are part of its benefit to us. Memory is not detached, not objective, and would be useless to us if it were, because above all, memory is emotional. It helps us fit ourselves within a broad stream of personal and collective experience. History provides references to time and place independent of ourselves. Conversely, we are the central character of our memory. In memory, we are the point of reference. In history, we are often merely observers. Our history records our decisions, our passages through the various crossroads we have encountered. Memory gives weight and prominence to some of those decisions, the ones which now seem to be important, formative. Working together, history and memory help us understand whether our decisions, which at one time all made perfect sense, still do. Today we unveil contextualization of parts of our university's history. We acknowledge our indebtedness to enslaved laborers who built our campus. We present narratives of the lives of men who influenced the direction of decisions made throughout our history. We provide context for the creation of a century-old tribute to the young men of our student body who left for war as the University Grays, Company A of the 11th Mississippi Infantry Regiment. Thus, as we confront today's crossroad, accompanied by the perspective permitted by both history and memory, we also acknowledge that the decisions made in the past are not our decisions today. By contextualizing these important aspects of our campus, we emphasize the distance we have traveled between our time and theirs, all the crossroads through which we have passed. As an illustration, keep in mind, less than a century ago, individuals at the university proudly placed on one of our buildings the name of a man, a virulent racist, who once advocated to his white voters that if necessary he would lynch every black man and woman in this state. How many and multitude the crossroads we have marched through since then. As I have said, we are the sum of all our decisions, good and bad, all of those crossroads. We do not shrink from this. We embrace it. We do not shield our embarrassment. We offer it up. We do not deny any part of who we have been, of who we are. As Maya Angelou wrote some years ago, history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, and if faced with courage, need not be lived again. We choose to face our past, our decisions, with courage. We own them all, knowing that to do less is to diminish ourselves today and to hobble our future selves. We also take inspiration from knowing that although we are the sum of all our decisions, no one of them defines us. It is true, some of our decisions live large in the perceptions others have of us, but only we choose the ones that define us. Those who misunderstand us, the community which binds us, our aspirations for the university we build together, see only our errors. In this they are wrong. We choose those decisions, those actions, those errors that define us. We meet them with new decisions, new actions, correcting past errors. In this we define who we are and who we will be. Today we take an important step. It is only a step, but we take it together with pride, carrying our past, rejoicing in our present, and in eager anticipation of all the crossroads our future holds. Thank you very much.
Yes, please, more rounds of applause, more applause. Thank you so much for that wonderful and inspiring talk. Thank you for reminding us as an institution about the crossroads, both looking back and looking forward. So again, another round of applause for Dr. John now. Could we have the members of the CACHC please stand? Thank you for your service to this institution. Can we also have the planning committee stand? Members of the planning committee? So I want to thank the members of both the CHCHC and the Planning Committee for this event, and all the staff members who have made this day possible. I have the awesome opportunity to introduce the students to you who have graciously agreed to help us honor this most recent contextualization work that has been completed on our campus. One of the most enjoyable aspects of the process has been talking with students over the last couple of months about their perceptions of today. They have added a special dimension to the historical implications of looking back as we better understand our now and as we prepare for our future. We strongly encourage you to visit each of the Plaque sites after the ceremony, where the following Column Society members will be serving as docents. At Longstreet Hall, we have Megan McLeod and Kelsey White. At George Hall, we have Tim Steinwick and Caroline Tyner. At Lamar Hall, we have A.J. Davidson and Victoria Robinson. At Barnard Observatory, we have Jarius Adams and Gabe Briscoe. At the Stained Glass Window at Ventress Hall, we have Mallory Lovejoy and Daryl Wicks. And at the Slave Laborers Plaque, we have Terrius Harris and Seth Dickinson. We are also pleased to have the student ambassadors on the stage with us who will come up one by one and read the exact text from the plaque. They are Longstreet Hall, Austin Spindler; George Hall, Courtney Cohn; Lamar Hall, Kelly Slater; Barnard Observatory, Brittany Brown; Tiffany Stained Glass Window in Ventress Hall, Nikita Beans; Enslaved Laborers, Jawan Robinson. I want to thank you so much to all of you for being here today for this celebration. Let us now listen and reflect on the powerful language shared in the plaques. Austin?
Longstreet Hall. This building was dedicated in honor of Augustus Baldwin Longstreet, 1790 to 1870, second president of the University of Mississippi. Born in Augusta, Georgia, Longstreet graduated from Yale and studied at Tapping Reeves Litchfield, Connecticut Law School before being admitted to the Georgia bar in 1815. He entered politics briefly, but was elected to the Georgia legislature, but was soon appointed judge of a state superior court. Throughout this period, Longstreet was an author and a newspaper editor, with his most renowned work, Georgia Scenes, published in 1835. In 1838, he retired from law to become an itinerant minister of the Methodist Episcopal Church. 6 years later, he played an important role in fostering the split among Methodists over the issue of slavery. Longstreet presented to the National Conference a petition from slaveholding states decrying the continuing agitation of Northern Methodists on slavery and its abolition. Such policy, the petition stated, threatened division by embracing policy inconsistent with Methodist ministry as practiced in the South. The Methodist Episcopal Church split over the issue of slavery in 1844. In 1840, Longstreet embraced another career when he was elected president of Emory College. He served there until 1848, when he became president of Cemetery College in Jackson, Louisiana. Less than a year later, he was elected the second president of the University of Mississippi in 1849. Longstreet also taught, and in 1853 was listed as professor of mental and moral science, rhetoric, logic, political economy, international law, and evidences of Christianity. Among his responsibilities as president, Longstreet, a slave owner, managed a number of enslaved laborers both on the university campus and on a farm near Abbeville, the latter owned by his son-in-law, L.Q.C. Lamar. Resigning from the university in 1856, he returned to administration when elected president of the University of South Carolina the following year, a position that he held until the Civil War. In 1861, he returned to Oxford, Mississippi, to reside with his family until his death in 1870.
George Hall. In 1920, this building was dedicated in honor of James Zachariah George, 1826 to 1897. Born in Georgia, George moved with his family to Mississippi in 1834, settling 2 years later in Carroll County. At the outbreak of war between the United States and Mexico, George volunteered for service with the 1st Mississippi Rifles. Upon his return, he completed his study in law and was elected reporter of the state Supreme Court in 1854 and again in 1860. In 1861, he served as a delegate to Mississippi Secession Convention and later served in the Confederate Army as well as commanded Mississippi State Militia. From 1875 to 1876, George chaired Mississippi's Democratic Executive Committee. During this time, George was most responsible for crafting the Mississippi Plan, a program of voter intimidation, violent repression, and a riot aimed at returning his state to white Democratic rule. Mississippi historian Dunbar Rowland later described the struggle as bitter and bloody. In 1878, George was appointed to the University of Mississippi Board of Trustees. In that role, he attended one meeting and then resigned the following year to serve as a trustee for what would become Mississippi State University. In 1879, he was appointed to the state Supreme Court and there elected to serve as Chief Justice. He resigned from the bench after being elected to the U.S. Senate in 1880, a post he would hold until his death. While in the Senate, George returned to Mississippi to become the chief architect of the 1890 state constitution. Alarmed that African Americans comprised a majority of Mississippians, George and others crafted a new state constitution that effectively reduced the number of qualified black Mississippi voters from 147,205 to only 8,615. As a result, whites gained an electoral majority in every county. So successful was the denial of voting rights for African Americans, the pattern of constitutional exclusion pioneered by George was repeated in Alabama, Louisiana, Virginia, and the Carolinas. The franchise would not be restored to African Americans in Mississippi until the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Lamar Hall. In 1977, this building was dedicated in honor of Lucius Quintus Cincinnatus Lamar II. Born in Putnam County, Georgia, Lamar moved to Mississippi in 1849. He joined the faculty of the University of Mississippi as adjunct professor of mathematics from 1850 to 1852, and again in 1861 as chair of ethics and metaphysics. During this period, he established himself as a lawyer, planter, and slave owner, owning 31 slaves by 1860. His political career began when he was elected to the Georgia State Legislature in 1853 and then to the U.S. House of Representatives from Mississippi in 1856. Resigning from Congress in 1860, Lamar served as delegate from Lafayette County to Mississippi Secession Convention and was chiefly responsible for writing the state's Ordinance of Secession. He helped raise the 19th Mississippi Infantry Regiment, and another state regiment, the 14th, was named the Lamar Rifles in his honor. Following the Civil War, Lamar returned to the faculty of the University of Mississippi, serving as professor of law and governmental science from 1867 to 1870. After Congress restored his political rights in 1873, Lamar represented Mississippi in the House until 1877, and in the Senate from 1877 to 1885. His 1874 eulogy for abolitionist Senator Charles Sumner made him a national figure in post-war sectional politics. Anxious Northerners, fearful of a renewal of sectional conflict, seized upon his assurances of Southern fidelity. Lamar's national prominence obscured the active role he played in dismantling Reconstruction in Mississippi to the detriment of the state's African-American citizens. In 1885, President Grover Cleveland named Lamar Secretary of the Interior, where he was instrumental in the preservation of national parklands, especially Yellowstone National Park. In 1888, he was nominated to the United States Supreme Court, where he served until his death in 1893. He remained the only Mississippian to have served on the Supreme Court and one of two Americans to have served on that court, as well as in a cabinet post, the House and the Senate.
Barnard Observatory. Frederick A.P. Barnard was the third president and first chancellor of the University of Mississippi, serving from 1856 to 1861. He joined the University of Alabama's faculty in 1838, and he started a Phi Beta Kappa chapter there. In 1854, Barnard accepted a position with the University of Mississippi as a professor of mathematics, physics, civil engineering, and chemistry. In 1858, Chancellor Barnard, who was committed to making the university a respectable academic institution, addressed an open letter to the trustees of the university, urging the creation of a Universitas Scientiarum, a university that taught students and was dedicated to research across the spectrum of human knowledge, from science and literature to agriculture, law, and medicine. Barnard Observatory was built in 1859 using slave labor with the intended function of housing the world's largest refracting telescope, but the outbreak of the Civil War prevented the telescope from ever being delivered. Barnard also found himself enmeshed in a significant controversy regarding slavery. While he was away from his campus residence in 1859, one of his slaves, Jane, was beaten and sexually assaulted by a student. Jane described the incident to Barnard's wife, Margaret. A professor who saw the student leaving their house corroborated Jane's account. Chancellor Barnard expelled the student and would not allow him to be readmitted. The Mississippi State Legislature and University Board of Trustees launched an investigation to determine if the student was expelled based on the testimony of a slave, which was, under state law, inadmissible against a white person. Although Barnard was exonerated by the board and given a vote of confidence, the inquiry led to accusations that he was insufficiently pro-slavery, and he left the university in 1861. Barnard later served as president of Columbia University from 1864 to 1889.
Ventures Hall, Tiffany stained glass window plaque. In 1889, the Psi chapter of Delta Gamma gave a memorial to the University of Mississippi campus. The memorial honored the University Grace, a name that referred to Company A of the 11th Mississippi Infantry Regiment of the Confederate Army. This company was primarily composed of students from the university who left their alma mater on May 1st, 1861. The memorial, in the form of a stained glass window, is from the Tiffany Glass Company in New York. It was placed here in the University Library in 1891. The $506.50 cost was raised by the Delta Gamma and University Alumni Society. The window, 12 feet high and 9 feet wide, was designed to have 3 main panels. The first panel depicts the students drilling as soldiers in front of Barnard Observatory. The middle panel portrays a battle scene with the battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia flying amid the carnage. Some newspaper reports stated that the battle scene was the first battle of the Grays, fought at First Manassas. However, the battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia was not present at that early battle. Others believe the battle scene is the most famous Pickett's charge on the third day of the Battle of Gettysburg, in which the University Grays suffered 100% casualties. Killed, wounded, or captured. The third panel depicts the surrender of the Army of Northern Virginia at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. The smaller panels include an anchor, which is the Delta Gamma badge, with the side chapter guard, and one with the Latin phrase, cum pete alorum, in honor of the University of Mississippi alumni who served in the Civil War.
Enslaved laborers' Plaque. The first buildings on this historic circle were constructed using the labor of enslaved African Americans from July 1846 to the opening of the university on November 6, 1848. Local slaveholders received payments to rent their slaves to the college in order to clear land, create roads, dig wells, and build the original campus structures, 2 dormitories, 2 faculty residences, a steward's hall, and the Lyceum. Other buildings were soon added, including the chapel, 1853, and the observatory, 1859. Work done by the enslaved included both unskilled tasks and highly skilled tasks, such as masonry, carpentry, wood carving, blacksmithing, and making the kiln fire bricks on site. Of the original 10 antebellum structures constructed in this fashion, 3 remain today and are within view of this spot: the old chapel, now crossed, Barnard Observatory, and the Lyceum. In addition, a large number of slaves performed the massive work required to dig Hillgard Cut, which lies 400 yards east of this marker, for the Mississippi Central Railroad in 1856 through 1857. They were rented from Oxford slaveholders who received railroad company stock in exchange for the work done by their slaves. Enslaved men and women owned by faculty and students who were housed on campus during the antebellum period and could not leave the grounds without permission. The university also maintained an enslaved labor force under this proctor, where their names were rarely recorded in historical documents. We do know that George, Jane, Henry, John, Squash, Moses, Will, and Nathan were among those who performed the work of farming, maintaining the buildings and stables, and laboring for the benefit of students and faculty as cooks, waiters, housekeepers, and groundskeepers. Slavery was a system underpinned by exploitation and violence, and slaves also suffered beatings and other abuses documented in the university records. The University of Mississippi today honors the legacy of these enslaved individuals and acknowledges the injustices under which they lived and labored.
Please join me in showing our appreciation to the student ambassadors. What a wonderful ceremony and what a truly wonderful day for our university. Thanks so much to everyone who had a hand in making today such a success. There were a lot of moving parts with so many involved to make it happen. I want to especially thank and give a special thanks to my co-chair, Dr. Katrina Caldwell, and my colleagues on the planning committee who have organized such a great program for us today, this special commemoration. It's been an honor to serve with all of you on this important and extraordinary endeavor for our university. And thank you to all of our wonderful speakers, everyone today who has made this day so special. We encourage all of you, before I adjourn, I've got a couple of things I want to point out. We encourage you to visit each of the 6 plaque sites. It's a beautiful day, and if you wish to walk, that's great. But we are also providing shuttles for the next hour from here to the various sites. The shuttles will leave from the Circle, drive on the first floor here at the Ford Center, and go back and forth to the sites. So before then, we ask that you please join us also in the lobby for a reception as we cap off this celebration. Thank you for being here.